United States President Donald Trump has just made another important statement in which he provided an update regarding his ultimatum to dictator Putin and the rumors about the upcoming Trump summit, Putin and Zelensky. He also explained exactly what it was about. He set conditions for Putin for a prompt meeting between the Russian and American presidents. In addition, Donald Trump answered whether his deadline is still in effect and whether we should expect tough sanctions against Russia and its partners tomorrow, August 8, as he promised. At the same time, the special representative of the United States President, Steve Witkoff, had a long conversation with national security advisors from Ukraine and several NATO countries. However, they did not have time to work through everything today, so the negotiations will continue tomorrow, but there are already some details here that are definitely worth publishing. But the signal that the negotiations will continue tomorrow suggests that there are serious doubts that tomorrow, August 8, Trump will actually impose those promised tariffs and sanctions. But let's break down Donald Trump's main statements today and see what has changed over the past few hours. My name is Alexei Pechi. We'll go through everything step by step, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, made new statements at the White House on the evening of August 7. First, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, commented on whether his deadline for the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin to cease fire in Ukraine, which expires on August 8, still stands. And so, members of the press asked the American president to clarify, your deadline for Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire is still in effect tomorrow. In response, Trump answered somewhat vaguely. Quote, that will depend on him. We'll see what he says. That will depend on him. Trump expressed disappointment when asked if he had set a deadline for Putin. That was his entire response to the question. So, it expires on August 8th, which is already tomorrow. It's still in effect. He says, well, we'll see what Putin says, and it all depends on him. Although I should remind you that on August 6th, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio talked about whether the United States would impose secondary sanctions against Russia after the deadline that Trump gave Putin to end the war against Ukraine expires. And according to Rubio, Trump was supposed to make a decision within the next 24 to 36 hours. As you understand, this deadline has almost expired. And yesterday, Marco Rubio made the following statement, quote, a lot will depend on how the negotiations go. The work we will be doing over the next few days, everything will depend on the progress. And then ultimately, the president will make a decision on whether he considers it necessary to impose sanctions or not, depending on how the situation develops. In general, there is a feeling that Trump will not impose any new sanctions in the near future. And there is a concern that Trump has once again fallen for the tricks of the dictator Putin. Putin is deliberately stalling for time so that Trump thinks that Russia is conducting good faith negotiations. Finally, that's it. Now there are good faith negotiations. And that's why there's no need to impose sanctions yet. Well, as long as negotiations are ongoing, as Marco Rubio explained back in the spring, saying that we can't impose sanctions while we're negotiating. By doing this, Putin once again makes Trump look weak, because he had previously made tough statements that Russia would feel pain on August 8, but now Trump is backing down and saying that as long as negotiations are ongoing, there won't be any sanctions. And these negotiations could go on for weeks. The Russians skillfully stalled for time in the spring, a tactic they are known to excel at. In addition, Trump stated that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin does not need to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in order to meet with him. And this is yet another important statement from Trump. Trump was asked if it was true that Putin supposedly needs to meet with Zelensky first before meeting with him. No, the United States president answered briefly. Trump was asked for clarification like, listen, this is important because Putin rejected the idea of meeting with Zelensky this morning. And many insiders, including Trump's favorite newspaper, the New York Post, citing White House officials, said that Trump set a condition that Putin should first agree to meet with Zelensky, and only then would he be ready to meet with him. To this, Trump responded, quote, I don't know, I haven't heard about that. They want to meet with me, and I will do everything I can to stop the killing. Last month, they lost 14,000 people killed. I dislike long waits and think it's a disgrace. Ukrainian and Russian soldiers are dying, but also people in the cities that are being hit by missiles. They are losing 35, 40 people. It's terribly important. The thing is, an unnamed White House official previously told Politico, the New York Post, and the New York Times that Trump would only meet with Putin after he has a meeting with Zelensky. He clarified that a three-way summit between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin is only possible after bilateral meetings. By the way, according to rumors in the American media, separate meetings between Trump and Zelensky and Trump and Putin are currently being discussed. After that, Zelensky plans to move on to a three-way meeting. The president of Ukraine has repeatedly stated that he is ready to meet with Putin. This was already stated back in May. Now Russians come there, what an unwashed society. They come into the comments under my videos and write, "Ha, so what? Zelensky has signed a decree that he will not negotiate with Putin. This issue has long since run its course. Zelensky has publicly stated many times that he is ready to meet with Putin." In May, Putin was shouting that he was ready and eager to go to Istanbul for negotiations, but then he chickened out and hid for some reason. He refuses to meet with Zelensky. And in one of the previous episodes, I explained the logic behind why Putin is so afraid to meet with Zelensky. Because you can lead Trump by the nose, you can steer the negotiation topic in another direction toward bilateral United States-Russian relations. And with Trump, you can try to impose your own ideas, your own views on this war, tell him about the root causes of this conflict, and so on. In the spring, Putin managed to do this. Remember those United States-Russian negotiations in February, March, and partly in April? When Trump was so deeply immersed in all that nonsense from Putin that he would come out and say, "Listen, we don't need this. We can negotiate and agree on everything directly with the Russians without involving the Europeans or Ukraine." He said we'll sign a mega deal with the Russians, making them rich. Putin wants peace. And then it all turned into Trump saying that it's Zelensky who's preventing peace, that it's Zelensky who doesn't want to end the war. And now remember, at what point did Trump's rhetoric start to change? After Trump met with Zelensky, when Trump started talking to European leaders, when Trump went to the NATO summit in June and discussed with partners and allies what was actually happening. And after that, subsequently a 50-day deadline surfaced, which was then reduced to 10 days, followed by tariffs against India and so on. And Putin understands perfectly well that at a bilateral meeting with Trump, he can keep spinning stories and say, "Listen, we're ready for peace, but we need a few more weeks to negotiate." But if a meeting with Zelensky takes place, then Putin will have to either negotiate or explain himself to Trump. But why are there no agreements? You've already met with Zelensky, so by now you should have worked out some positions. Then why? So, Putin, it turns out you're not capable of making agreements. All the conditions have already been created for you to hold proper negotiations, but you can't. And that's why Putin is hiding from these negotiations with Zelensky. But he thinks that he's the smartest one right now. At the same time, today, August 7, when these rumors started that Trump wouldn't meet with him unless he agreed to meet with Zelensky, Putin suddenly didn't rule out a meeting with the Ukrainian president. According to him, certain conditions must be met for negotiations at the leaders' level. But that's still a long way off. You understand, right? They're starting to dodge. The Washington Post writes that United States President Trump may hold separate meetings with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky before a possible trilateral summit. Apparently, the possibility of separate meetings was discussed during Trump's conversation with European leaders yesterday. The Washington Post also writes that the decision of Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov to downplay the significance of the trilateral meeting highlighted the ongoing tension. At the same time, both sides are now trying to be the first to meet with Trump, considering the advantages this could provide. As I mentioned earlier, it's unfortunate that Trump is once again playing into Putin's hands. At the same time, Trump's special representative, Steve Witkoff, had a long conversation with security advisors from Ukraine and several NATO countries, specifically Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Finland. But they haven't managed to work everything out yet. And it's known that Witkoff was basically informing the Europeans and Ukrainians about what he discussed with Putin, what conditions Putin is setting, what conditions Ukraine is setting, and whether it's possible to find some common ground. But tomorrow, August 8th, These negotiations will continue, so it's still unclear whether Trump will impose the promised sanctions and tariffs as early as August 8th. And the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, made a statement about this. Quote, "Just now, my team reported to me that the security advisors had a rather long and very detailed conversation. There was a significant group of participants in the discussion. Thank you all for your efforts and genuine commitment to ending the violence and securing lasting peace." The advisors agreed to resume their discussion tomorrow as much remains unresolved. Ukraine, as always, will work productively. We needed just peace. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Bye, everyone.